Welcome, everyone. My name is Natalia Watson, and I'm a WSET certified beer educator and also a business development manager for our new beer qualifications. For anyone who is not familiar with WSET, we're the world's leading provider of drinks qualifications in wine, spirits, sake, and now beer. We have over 50 years of experience designing and delivering courses that help both professionals and enthusiasts to learn more about their favorite beverages. You can study with us in over 70 countries through one of our over 700 course providers around the world, and you can learn more about where to study with us at wsetglobal.com. Just a few housekeeping bits. For today's session, we will be recording it. That means it will be available to watch back via YouTube on the WSET Global Events Hub. We'll also have a few minutes for questions at the end. On the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box, so we'd like you to use that to submit your questions, but feel free to use the chat to let us know where you're dialing in from and just say hello that way. Turning our attention to the session today, we're going to be looking at the evolution of no and low alcohol beer. And there is no better person to host the session for us than James Rabagliati, who is head brewer at Nirvana Brewery, which is the UK's first dedicated no and low alcohol brewery. James is an award-winning IBD diploma qualified brewer with over a decade of experience in the industry. He worked for Brew by Numbers and then Homerton before coming to Nirvana at the start of 2024. There he has designed two SIBA no-low gold-winning metal beers and is a really passionate advocate for this category. So he is the perfect person to tell us all about it. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much. That was a very nice introduction. So my name's James. I'm the head of brewing and operations here at Nirvana. And I just want to talk you through some of the innovation that we're doing, discuss the increasing market sophistication of this category and the sensory complexity that we're seeing in no and low beers. So a little bit of a background on Nirvana. As Talia said, we were the first dedicated no and low brewery in the UK. We were founded in 2016 by Becky Taylor-Keane. Her father had stopped drinking, and at the time there wasn't really a range of different beers for him to drink, and he enjoyed his beers. So she went about on a mission to produce the best no and low beers in the UK. And as part of them being quite a family who enjoyed their beers, it was very important for them to have a range of different beers. So we currently have an IPA in our range. We have two different lagers, a stout, a radler, a hefeweizen, and an amber ale or best bitter. And we work to the ethos that we're a brewery. Our beers just happen to have no alcohol in them. And we in this talk we'll go through our journey to how we've got to our current range today and the difficulties and how we overcome them in producing these beers. So I think it's also important to look at where low and no is as a category and why there's so much tension on it right now. So 43% of adults are reporting moderating their alcohol intake, and it's often reported that this is the Gen Z are driving this, but we don't necessarily see that with our consumers. We see it from a whole different range of ages. People are far more aware of their alcohol intake. And I think that the good growth of low and no and the improvement in flavors has helped that happen, and people are kind of jumping on board. 1 in 3 pub visits now include a no alcohol consumption, and we really see that the no and low drinker helps drive where the group goes. And there's also been a rise in zebra drinking. So that is the habit of having an alcoholic beer and then having a non-alcoholic beer after, and then going back and forth. And in our opinion, quality taste and in the experience of the consumer is paramount, and that's what we're always thinking about. We like to think of ourselves as leaders in this category and driving it. But we're one of the first in the UK to have a 500 ml long pour option. So you used to just be able to get alcohol-free beer in 330 mils. And I'm sure anybody who's been to a pub and their friends are having pints of beer and they've got a slightly sad-looking 330 bottle there, kind of can understand why it's not as attractive to the consumer. We were early on in kind of having a radler-style beer in our range. We have our Cloudy Lemon Lager. We really push quality. We are very much quality driven, and I think that's only what's going to drive this category. So we'll discuss that later. And we work with various industry bodies, and we also have a range of kegs that, again, is part of our mission to kind of close the gap, we call it, between alcohol-free beer and alcoholic beer. Right, so where did we start when we first started brewing beer? I brewed my first alcohol-free beer, not at Nirvana, but at a brewery called Hamerton. And the UK craft beer scene is incredibly innovative. We don't necessarily have all the kit that the larger breweries have. So everyone was trying different methods to try and introduce a low alcohol beer. We, at that brewery, and initially at Nirvana, and this was kind of the method that craft brewers were using at the time, we would use maltose trios negative yeasts. So when you're mixing your grain with your hot water in your mash, when you're making a beer, the enzymes produce both short and long chain sugars. We would mash at a high temperature, which means you're mainly going to have longer chain sugars, and then we would use traditional English ale yeasts, which cannot consume maltose trios, which you see there in yellow. The idea being that you'll then get a low alcohol beer. So there's less glucose, there's less maltose because you mashed in high. You've got more of these long chain sugars, and you, as a result, have less alcohol. A lot of breweries, craft breweries, when you started having to do this, would inevitably have to pad out these beers using either maltodextrin or lactose, and to help give them a bit more body. And we at Nirvana were looking for a way to basically just use the 4 key ingredients of beer. So just use water, hops, malt, and yeast. So we were looking to move beyond that method. We also at Nirvana used to do a 0.0 blend method, which is very early days, where it was various different malts and hop extracts and colorings and flavorings to make a beer. But again, when we were really looking at our range last year, we were going through it with the ethos that we're just producing beer. This isn't what we want to do. We didn't think 0.0 beers were up to the standard we wanted our range to be, so we ended up dropping them. Some consumers will only drink a 0.0% beer, but we felt as a company that most consumers will drink 0.5%, and the quality we felt we could produce with the 0.5% meant that we would stick with that. So we now have 2 different brewing methods to support our quite a diverse portfolio of beers. The first is vacuum distillation. So what we do with this is we brew a full strength beer, so a 5% beer, and we then distill the alcohol out. Now we're doing this in a vacuum, and this greatly reduces the boiling point of alcohol down from 78.3 C down to 34 C. So I'll talk later in this session about aldehydes and the difficulties you have with low and no beer and aldehydes, but that's going to help stop their development, and also you're going to lose some volatile. It's going to stop you losing so many volatile oils that you would do at that higher temperature. So it's far more gentle, and it reduces off flavors, and it allows us to create beers that are true to regional style. So you can use whatever yeast you like. You can use a saison yeast, you can use a Hefeweizen yeast, you can use a lager yeast, and you'll get that character coming through. We do find, though, with these beers, if you strip it all out, all the alcohol, you just have a 0.0% beer there, we find them slightly thin. So after that, what we do is we blend in some early fermentation wort to increase the alcohol percentage. It's 0.3% on our Hefeweizen, and that extra little bit of body we think helps kind of mask the fat that the body you lose from the alcohol. So that's the way we go about that to produce a full flavored and full bodied beer. The other method we use is the hybrid yeast method. These yeasts started coming out into the market about 4 or 5 years ago. They're all developed from kind of classical breeding programs, and they are fantastic, and they've completely revolutionized the game in no and low beer. What happens here is, you probably remember I was talking about the different sugars you had in beer before, and these yeasts will only consume glucose. So if you mash in at high temp, we go in around 73, 74. You have a relatively low starting gravity, anything between kind of 24 and 27. you're very, very consistent in hitting your alcohol levels at under 0.5%. And the longer chain sugars that you have left, they give a perception of body, whereas if you only have the shorter chain sugars there, they would give more perception of sweetness. They're very low in diacetyl precursor production, so you don't get off flavor, very little aldehyde, and they produce very little sulfur. So these yeasts they're very neutral, so they can allow you to create a wide variety of different beers. So we use them to produce ales, stouts, and one of our lagers. If you hit your sweet spot, they're not too sweet, they have a good body. And it allows us, as I said, just to brew a normal beer, but with some tweaks to the process. We also add some kind of yeast manna protein extracts from yeast to give a bit of body, which is actually something which comes to the red wine world, and some hop extracts to add extra body and sharpness into some of our beers. But really, we're sticking to our ethos of kind of using the 4 key ingredients. So I mentioned earlier aldehydes. Aldehydes, they mainly are produced. They come from the malt, and they come basically as you heat the malt during the malting process. So you get it more in darker malts, and you also get it from heat and from oxidation. Now they produce a vast array of different off flavors. I've got some highlighted here. Furfural, which is kind of cooked meat. 3-methyl-butanol, which is kind of varnish. 2-methyl-butanol, which is solvent, and methionol, which is cabbage, which I think you can all agree is not particularly what you want in your beer. Now, these are particularly prevalent in no and low beers. There's less ethanol, so the matrix polarity is different, so that there's more volatility. Pasteurization or dealkalization, if you're doing it at a high heat, and it's more thermal stress, so you get more the Maillard reaction, and so that comes through more. And the oxidation is increased through the Strecker degradation, again, so you have more of these off flavors. You have a lower ester profile, so there's less flavor masking, and you can have residual sugars, which can lead to worty flavors. And in the fermentation, you have less yeast activity. If you think about a 4% beer, you're moving from kind of 40 specific gravity down to 10. Like I said, we're starting at kind of 27 specific gravity down to kind of 22 perhaps for our IPA. So the yeast produces CO2 and it bubbles, and these aldehydes go out, but that's not happening for us. So we really need to work at methods to reduce them. So how do we do this? How do we do this and produce a range of beers? Because we're not just doing very, very light beers. The lighter malts you get from the maltster, that's going to have less of these aldehydes coming through. So we're quite controlled with the use of our darker malts. I'll come on to this later when we discuss some of the recipes for our beers. We use some unmalted grains, which don't have this thermal load. So we use some unmalted oats and wheat. And we use various processing aids, which are going to bind these, drop them out, and stop it. We have healthy yeast. We're not continually repitching our yeast. I think that would be a dangerous thing for a no and low brewer to do anyway. But we use fresh dried yeast every time. We make sure our nutrients are there as well, so we're not going to be coming through during fermentation. And as ever, as a brewer, we are very careful with our O2s when packaging. And we add some antioxidants, so we add some sulfites and benzoates into our beer. We do get some pushback from consumers about that. Some people are slightly wary about adding preservatives, but we do them at a lower level. We believe they increase the shelf life of our beer, and obviously we don't have alcohol in our beer to protect it. So we see it as a duty of care, especially when we're sterile filtering it and not pasteurizing it as we do for some of our beers. So I spoke about how we really want to kind of drive the sensory side of low and no beer. We do this kind of through 3 main methods. We obviously have our own internal taste panels for go, no go, and repeatability and product stability. We also try to engage the wider brewing scene and consumers. So, for instance, doing stuff with WSET or working with various yeast manufacturers to do events for brewers. And then once a quarter, we run an external industry taste panel to taste all our beers, mark out any off flavors we will be getting, and then go through the process with these experts and see where this could be coming from. You'll see a little spider diagram down there, and that came out quite well. So that's got some mainly bready and sweet notes, but there's a little bit of ham and a bit of fruity, a little bit of apple on that one. So in that taste panel, we would discuss the method and discuss what we could do to improve that. So these are some of the beers here and some of the changes we made as a result of that taste panel. So Nirvana Best, which is our amber ale, the grain and bread character were praised. Some people thought it was slightly too sweet, and there were some people complained of some ham and catty notes. So the main speciality malt that we used in this was amber malt, because we wanted to have a really nutty profile, but we reduced that slightly, so we slightly lightened the beer, and we introduced mash life, which is the processing aid, which helped bind these aldehydes to try and reduce that. With our IPA, it was highly rated for the body and the hop balance and drinkability, but there was a perception that we didn't have enough hop aroma, and some almond and corn came through. So we looked to change our hopping schedule. We've done a lot of work with a fantastic company called Totally Natural Solutions, with some of their liquid hop products, which will allow us to increase our hop loads without increasing bitterness or risking any hop creep in our beer. So for those who perhaps aren't brewers, hop creep is when the plant matter in hops helps kind of break down the longer chain sugars in the beer, and you can get re-fermentation, which we obviously have no room for in no and low beer. And we used a mixture of Vienna malt and Munich malt as a base in our IPA. We changed those ratios around to increase the Vienna malt, which is slightly lighter, and reduce the Munich, again, to kind of reduce some of these aldehydes which would have been picked up during the malting process. Nirvana Pills, which was praised for being relatively crisp, but we had some feedback that people were slightly confused or wasn't necessarily clear whether it would be a Pils or a Hell style lager, which was a bit of an issue for us because we produce both a Pils and a Hell style lager. One of the things we are looking to do is really kind of, I spoke about us having a range, but we also want to drive into categories and produce different beers, which you sort of part of the same categories. That's why we have two lagers. So Pils is a hop-led lager. So to kind of get that perception of hoppiness more, we reduce the starting and the final gravity, and we increase the sulfites in the water to get a bit more dryness and bitterness on the mouth. And by reducing the starting and final gravity, we hope the bitterness would come through a bit more. And then our nitro stout, generally we had quite a lot of praise for that, but the aroma was seen was fantastic, but it didn't really match with the body. So, and then there was some meaty notes, so some aldehydes coming through. So we increased our original gravity there. We didn't want to go down the route for this core range beer of adding maltodextrin and lactose, so we increased the original gravity to get a bit more sweetness and a bit more body. We worked with Murphy's, who are one of our suppliers, to kind of help drop out these aldehydes in the mash, and we did some work with TNS on a product of theirs called Clarity, which again helped suppress these aldehydes. So those meaty notes were kind of taken out, and we got more coffee and dark chocolate, which is really what we're going for. So when you're dealing with these problems, I hope you can kind of see it's very style specific. We really have to go with each beer, dose different processing aids to make sure that we're getting the flavor profile that we want. And when going to brewing these beers, we go from the very beginning. We kind of choose what we see as the right method for the right beer. Right, on trade is one of the key growths in the no and low sector, as I mentioned earlier. I was talking to Natalia just before this. I think at the start of the year it was something like 6 or 7% of pubs. I may be wrong on these figures. Had a draft line, and they're estimating it could be up to 20% by the end of the year. So they're really going for it in a big way. But obviously, in no and low beer, you don't have any alcohol, So that kind of comes with its own problems in terms of stability and consistent quality. So we work very closely with pubs, and we kind of like to support them on their journey with low and low. So we have the smaller range, the 330ml versions of our beers, which is more for restaurants really than pubs. But then with pubs, we have our 500ml bottles, so the consumer has what looks like a pub, like a pint or something close to the pint if they're with their friends. We're looking to introduce 20-litre kegs to move beyond that. So once a pub is going up to above 20 litres a week, we will start working with them to put that on their range, so it's on the bar, because it allows the consumer to basically have exactly the same experience as the alcoholic drinker, but the beer's alcohol free. We also have 30-litre kegs. You'll see there's a little QR code on up there on the top. So each of our kegs has that QR code on it, and that gives our pubs a guide to how to manage their no and low line. We talk about how the no and low line should be seen as the kind of flagship line in their cellar, because cleanliness is definitely key. There are some very legitimate pathogen concerns, so we keep our pHs low, below 4.2, and as I said earlier, we do add some stabilizers into our beer to make sure that doesn't become an issue. So we're almost time for questions now. I realise we covered an awful lot there quite quickly, but we see no and low beer as moved to something which was seen as kind of as worthy by the consumer, as hopefully as something which is seen as world class now. The flavour developments in the category have been huge, and consumers seem to be recognising that. It's become a very competitive environment, and lots of people are pushing to the flavour boundaries, which is fantastic, because a better understanding of how you make low and no beer means better beer. So I think that's great. The role of yeast, aldehyde management, and sensory calibration is critical. Consumers remember a bad pint of beer, they don't necessarily remember a good pint of beer, so you've really got to be consistent. Education, I think, is a crucial role here as well in raising standards across the industry, and we look to continue pushing the category forward, hopefully by some innovative beers, by our tastes, and by the choice of beers that we offer. So I hope that was informative, and I am very excited to get some of your questions.
My goodness, we call this a bite-sized session, and there was so much packed in there. Thank you so much, James. Just a reminder to everyone, please do use the Q&A box to submit any questions. I jotted down a few that I will start with, just as we wait for questions to come in. I would love to know, James, how are you learning about all of this? So is it that you are learning by trial and error? Is it that you are getting things sent to you from suppliers? Is it that you are going to trade shows and discovering new products in this space? Clearly you have innovated, and how has that all happened in your role?
So there's definitely some trial and error. We have a very small pilot kit, and most craft breweries do. But we work, like I said, very closely with suppliers to try and innovate our beers. We've actually got a new beer coming out soon, which will be a collaboration with TNS, who are the hop product people we spoke about, and they've been really useful in talking us through how can we increase the hop charge in a low and no beer without getting too much bitterness and without that hop creep that I was talking about. So it's a little bit of both. I think one of the great things about the UK craft beer scene is people are willing to take a risk and try something and get it wrong. So because it's a very innovative space. So but yeah, it's a balance really.
Yeah, it sounds very much like a team effort, right? You've got folks from different sides of the industry all coming together to see what interesting new products we can create. We have had a comment, from Annette. Hi, Annette. Lovely that you're here. It says, I'm looking forward to reading the 10 steps PDF. So I think that must have been what was linked to via the QR code. Such an important resource for retailers pouring NA beer. In terms of that retailer piece, how has that sort of been put together again? Is that trial and error? Is that needing to go into these venues and then just using the PDF as a bit of a reminder? How do you get them to make those significant changes on this particular key line, as you were mentioning?
So that's the sales staff have been great with that and working through the pubs. Sales support I think is massive here. And then for the actual 10 steps themselves, that was working, going through the kind of the cask mask kind of ideas for how cellars should be run, and various suppliers of cleaning products. Working with them to be like, how would you ideally do this? But like I said, I think some pubs naturally can be cautious, which I think is is correct. So it's kind of allaying those concerns and giving them the options to do it incrementally. So not just suddenly being like, well, you need to sell 30 litres of beer a week. So that's why we're looking to introduce these 20 litre packages, so they can take that first step, trial it out, and then see the benefits themselves. See what consumers say.
Yeah, as you noted down there, it's so important that you give the consumers that chance to try before they buy, starting with the smaller quantities and then allowing them to upgrade that package size in a way that they're going to be able to take care of it. Oh, lots of questions. Wonderful. Okay, so one from Sebastian. For each style of beer, do you use modified yeast plus distillation to obtain a beer with 0.5 or 0% ABV, or are they used separately? Can they be used together?
That is a fantastic question. We do it separately on our beers. So some of our beers are vacuum distilled, and some of our beers are modified yeast. There is a movement towards the sector of brewing beers to 0.5%, and then vacuum distilling or the alcohol out that way. The theory being that you're taking less out of the beer, so it doesn't feel so uneven, I guess, would be the kind of the language you would use there. So that is something you are seeing. It's not something that we do ourselves.
Great question, though. Another one. This is a good one from Ryan. Hi, Ryan. Thank you for joining us. I love no low alcohol beers, but I often find there's a barrier of price point. New NA drinkers assume they should pay less since there's no or lower alcohol, not understanding the challenges and cost in brewing high quality NA beer. How can breweries that make NA beer get creative on education to ensure price point is not a barrier and that there's better education out there?
That is a really good question.
That's the top dollar question, totally.
Yeah, that is a top dollar question. We try and talk to our consumers as much as we can about what we're doing. Because I can conceive you haven't got the duty, which is obviously a huge part of what's in your pint, but you are your ingredients, as you can see from us, we use slightly less ingredients, but we really design use the ingredients of either 5% beer or 3% beer. So the ingredients aren't too different. And then with the vacuum distillation process, that's a whole added process and cost into your beer.
Yeah.
So I think it's events like this, people like Club Soda, and talking to people about all the research and development, all the time that's going on in these beers and the provenance of the beers, letting them understand that you're really using the same products you would use in beer. And so the money, it is unfortunately maybe more expensive than people would like it to be, but that is something I do think the industry it's always pushing, but you always get a bit of pushback there because people assume that you're brewing a product which is much weaker when it's hopefully you can see from this we're really not. We're just brewing a beer.
Yeah.
But just with an extra processes involved.
Yeah, I think it is that idea to people. You're brewing a beer and then perhaps doing extra steps along the way or adding in new innovative ingredients that may be a bit more expensive to that brewing process. So as you said, things like this are great to let people know how it's really made. And the key focus of what you guys are doing, sticking to beer's four main ingredients as much as you can, is something that you want to take away as one of your sort of key things that set your brand apart. I'm going to very quickly ask one last question. I don't know how much you'll have to say on this, but I'm just curious, as we know that beer is really leading the way in the no and low alcohol space, do you think there are things that wines and spirits could learn from the world of beer?
I think there are. I think it's. I do think it is a greater challenge simply by the fact of the amount of alcohol you're taking out. Some of those wines, which the 6% wines where you dealcoholize the wine, you blend it back. I think those are really fantastic innovations. But I would say from our point of view, it's what we really see great feedback of is people who have stopped drinking, but they love stouts or they loved amber ales. So when you get them that option, that they're so happy about it. So I think it's from the wine world, it'd be someone might stop drinking, but they might love Rieslings or they might love Shiraz. So giving them that option consumers will really, I think, take that on board and really enjoy it. So that's what I would be the main takeaway.
Yeah, really thinking about what they're looking for flavor-wise and how you can deliver that in a no and low alcohol version. Awesome. Thank you so much. So thank you everybody for watching. We'll have a little feedback poll popping up on your screen now, so please do share your thoughts on the session. Again, the session is going to be emailed to you. Share it far and wide. There was so much amazing information covered here. Again, it will also be available to watch back on the WSET Events Hub on YouTube. And you can see our previous events there, some about beer and of course wine, spirits, and sake too. To find out more about our beer qualifications, if you'd like to study with us like the Nirvana team did, head to wstglobal.com. And a massive thank you again. Really nice to see some familiar names in terms of folks that were joining us. But please do share this. I have learned so much, and I'm so grateful to you, James, for putting this together and for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.